Hi guys, this is Dr. Sadashivam once again with you. And today there was an article written by Dr. Swaminathan Anklesaria Aiyar in which he talks about World Bank and International Monetary Fund and their relevance in the current world, and he feels that they should conserve their funds and give it to debt ridden countries like Sri Lanka, etc. And they have to use their expertise which has been gained over the last 60 or 70 years. This is the opinion of Mr. Swaminathan Anklesaria Aiyar, and you guys have to focus on the background, context and data. There is no need for you to reflect the same opinions as given by Swaminathan Aiyar or me. Now you have to use the statistics, apply your mind to the problem, and you have to come up with your own suggestions. This might come in IAS, IPS, essay questions. It can be asked in the interviews, or it can come in the preliminary exams also using 3 or 4 choices. Now let's come back to the story. Please remember two guys' names, and one is the International Monetary Fund Secretary of State. His name is Janet Yellen, and the Deputy Secretary of the World Bank, Mr. Dalip Singh. We will be talking about these two people. Now the World Bank has been very conservative in lending because what they always focus on is AAA ratings. Frankly speaking, for such banks there is no need for any AAA ratings because they can lend to the riskiest people. In spite of lending to the riskiest assets, they will still be able to maintain their AAA ratings because they have all been backed by the richest governments. And even within the bank, their budgets and so many other things are decided on the basis of the total volume of money lent. So therefore they don't need to be so conservative, especially as far as discharging loans to other countries are concerned, and that's the opinion of Mr. Swaminathan Aiyar, right? Because these institutions were created, whether it is IMF or the World Bank, they were created during when the World War II ended, but today the whole world is different. The whole world is sitting on kind of a, some countries, dead cliff. We are talking about Sri Lanka, and there are so many other countries waiting in the wings. We really don't know when their bubbles will burst, but their reasons can be too many, but definitely not this particular reason, because the banks are conservative in lending their funds. So now we have to think in terms of whether there is a need for this World Bank to exist or not, which means we need to deeply think about the relevance of these bank. The question is raised by Mr. Swaminathan, and for that he is substantiating it with his own data, and if you don't agree with that, you can put your own points and you can substantiate. That's the beauty of IAS. If you say you agree with him, you will get marks. Even if you don't agree with him, you will still get marks, because what they see for you in is whether you have a clear cut thinking process, are you projecting the right data, or whatever is the data table, the topic table, do you have enough grasp of that particular subject. There is no question of language. Even if you write in English, if you can show your knowledge, your data, write in Hindi, write in Tamil, write in Bengali, it is the merit of your point that is what is considered. Are you able to think clearly? That is what is being seen by your examiners, whether it is in the essay paper or it is in the interview. Okay, now we are going to talk about India. India even today gets some money from the World Bank, but that is very less. There was a time when we were dependent on the World Banks, and today's India is not the India which existed 30-40 years back. Now if you look at FDI, we are getting $65 billion of FDI, and we get more than $80 billion through commercial bonds, and over and above that $87 billion of remittances from Indians staying abroad. The three of these, they work out to approximately $240 to $250 billion. If you turn back the pages of history, way back in 1996, the total GDP of India was somewhere around 500 to 600 billion dollars. Now in these three we get 250 billion dollars. So looking at it from India's perspective, India is a very big country, right? But if you look at this from small countries, there is no perspective, there is no relevance of World Bank. Now if you look at the origins of these agencies, when the World War ended in 1945 with the bombing of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Pearl Harbor, Germany, Axis, Alice, we have learnt all that, right? Once the bomb was dropped in Hiroshima, I think it was 1945 September is what I think, the whole world capital market collapsed completely, and therefore whatever gap was created because of the collapse of the capital markets, there was a need for somebody to step in and create a new world order. So those days it had some relevance, and therefore such a bank was required who will take the leadership, who will take the reins, and they will be able to guide all these countries for reconstruction, because a lot of damages. So they started with an objective of reconstruction. So once the reconstruction is done, then it is development. First we need something to eat. After that, slowly and steadily you get a roof, and then you need a cycle for transportation, then a two-wheeler, then a car, then car with AC, then car with AC and airbags. You don't ask for car with airbags in the beginning. That's what is Maslow's of the levels of hierarchy: security needs, esteem needs, self-actualization, etc., etc. So it was reconstruction first, and then development. IMF also started with the same purpose, to manage the exchange rates. Now tell me, who decides that it is 77 rupees for a dollar? Why not 85 rupees? Why not 50 rupees? Therefore you need some kind of an agency in the world who will be able to look at balance of trade, balance of payments, demand and supply of currency, etc., etc. Keeping all these minds, they will fix the exchange rates so that transactions can happen across countries. And not just that, IMF was also the lender of the last resort. Whenever a whole country becomes bankrupt, for example, if somebody becomes bankrupt, whom will he approach? He will approach God. But if a country loses everything, becomes a Kangal, bankrupt, he will approach the International Monetary Fund. That is why they are called as the lender of the last resort. It's an economic subject. Those guys who have learned economics, you will understand that. So that's the origin of these banks. Then over a period of time, the post-war reconstruction was over, development was over, everything was over. So after approximately 25 years, say 1970, the capital markets had recovered substantially. They cover financial markets, right? But then they had to do something. So what they did was, they took up new initiatives like poverty alleviation, then social sectors, health, water, education. They started focusing on all these and started going in a different track, and along with that they also created some soft loan windows for lending money to poorer countries. Come say come interest, with low interest, so that these poor countries can come up and they will be able to reduce the inequalities of wealth, inequality, right? So those were some of the social objectives. And over a period of time in the year 1990s, they wanted to transform a lot of communist countries to capitalist countries. Of course, some money was lent for those purposes also, but today there's no concept of community. Even countries like China, etc., etc., but still their ideologies have. But there's nothing much like capitalist and communist. All that has gone, and every country is focusing on their own GDPs, and it's broadly a very interconnected world, and everybody is interested in their own return on investments and make their country safe for people to live in and rising the standard level of their people. So this World Bank has lost much of its relevance, and this is what Swaminathan Anklesaria Aiyar says. He says because those days there was no savings, and only those guys who had excellent credit worthiness, only they could get loans. But now the world is different. After 2000 especially, there is no shortage of money at all. If you look at it, China is one of the massive contributors because their savings were too huge, and savings not just there, everywhere. So this is what is called as global savings glut. So which means what money shortage was there at one time, it changed into a glut because money supply became too high. Because generally when the money supply goes high and in a heavy savings glut situation, the interest rates go down. In fact, in the West it went down to 2%, 1%, 0.5, some countries 0. So wherever the interest rates were 0 or very less, they will look for riskier assets. They will look for asset classes which are risky so that they will be able to get slightly higher interest. For example, if you put money in a government bond, the interest is less because that is very safe. But if you put that money in a riskier asset, for example, the guy does not have a document, the guy does not have certain things, but they will still lend to him because he is willing to give you a slightly higher interest. So wherever the assets are riskier, you get higher interest rates. Though the country China, which used to borrow huge sums of money from the World Bank way back in 1980 when it was on its takeoff development stage, they kept on taking money, but today if you see, he is lending to the world. He has become a lender from a borrower. Today if you look at the lending of China, it is more than World Bank and other West donors. And not just that, lots and lots of private capital channels, trillions and trillions of dollars are going into all these dubious countries. There are so many asset classes. You have leverage schemes, you have cryptocurrencies, and not just that. If you look at the capital flows, we're talking of unicorns. Every day we see in newspapers, all this money is getting into those unicorns. In India, we have more than 100 unicorns. Even in China, you have unicorns. They have 1,000 unicorns. So in this manner, trillions of dollars are getting into risky assets from the capital markets. What is the need for World Bank to get into all this? Now Swaminathan feels that IMF and World Bank, whatever money they have, let them conserve that money and use that money for countries like Sri Lanka. Because they are unable to meet their debt obligations, let them help these kind of countries, because what they are going on now is a temporary phase. That doesn't mean they will sink. They have tourism, they have tea, they have resources, mineral resources, tourism. There has been some irresponsibility from the government side, from a finance angle, and it's a temporary blip on the screen, and they will once again rise from the ashes, buddy. Right? They might come, and it is easy to recover that money. And it's not just Sri Lanka. There are so many countries like Sri Lanka. I don't want to take the names of those countries. You can check the internet, and which are those countries which are standing in the line, and World Bank should support those kinds of countries. Now please remember, these banks, they are not just lenders, they are experts, because over the last 60-70 years they worked in several countries, and they have complete knowledge of reconstruction. For example, a country which has been destroyed in a war, they have a lot of experience in the last 60 or 7 years, 70 years, how to get into that country, where to put the money, how to prioritize your roads, bridges, slowly and steadily, how you will be able to bring those countries into the development path. They have that expertise. China also takes money from them, borrows money from them, not for the sake of money. They have enough money available with them, but they borrow from the World Bank. For what? Not for money, but for their expertise. And therefore, Swaminathan Saab his opinion is World Bank and IMF should work like consultants, and they shouldn't focus too much on lending. And I hope you like this video. It's slightly a complex article, but very, very important article from the IAS, IPS and other competitive exams point of view. And this is Dr. Sadashivam signing off till we meet again. Bye bye. Jai Hind.